Good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Keidoshiūtė. I'm cultural attaché of Lithuania in Israel. Firstly, I want to thank everyone who is joining us tonight for the event Jewish Vilna and Beyond, Contemporary Art and Historical Memory. It will consist of two parts, the viewing of a video entitled Jewish Vilnius and the Works of Artist Eglė Ridikaitė, directed by Mikas Žukauskas, and followed by an international discussion about various artistic inquiries that probe our collective memory and its blind spots in Vilnius and other places like Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beirut, Rome, and Kaunas. The discussion will be moderated by architecture historian, curator, and my dear colleague in the UK, cultural attaché, Dr. Ulla Tornau, with participation of truly extraordinary international speakers. Architect Professor Amnon Barol from Israel, art historian and director of the newly established Vilnius Museum, Dr. Rasa Antanavičiūtė, art historian Professor Adakiara Zevi from Italy, artist Doz Lecha Levi from Israel, and Lithuanian UK-based writer, artist, critic, and curator Paulina Pukytė. I would like to thank the main organizers and commissioners of the said video, Lithuanian Culture Institute and Contemporary Art Center in Vilnius, as well as our Israeli partner, recently renewed and reopened Anu Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv. And also, of course, artist Eglė Ridikaitė herself, who is here with us tonight, and whom you will hear speaking in the video very shortly, which was inspired by her works in the first place. This video gives a glimpse into her series of paintings entitled We Are Guests, which depicts the uncovered fragments of the Great Synagogue of Vilnius. It opens up an avenue for a broader conversation we wish to have about similar locations around the world where contemporary art has challenged our interactions with the local heritage and historical memory associated with it. The works interpreting the bima from the excavation of the Great Synagogue of Vilnius are used through the courtesy of the Vilna Great Synagogue and Schulhof Research Project, directed by John Seligman from Israel Antiquities Authority, Zenonas Baubonis and Justinas Račas from Kultūros paveldo išsaugojimo pajėgos, and Richard Freund from University of Hartford. Thank you. And now I invite you all to watch the video.
Žydai, kurie atsikėlė į Vilnių palyginti vėlai, tai yra antroji 16 amžiaus pusėje, ilgainiui sukūrė unikalų kvartalą, kuris buvo vadinamas žydų miestu. Na ir ilgainiui tiek caro valdžia XIX amžiuje, tiek tarpukariu šitą kvartalą norėta nugriauti. Tačiau antras pasaulinis karas, kai tas kvartalas iš tikrųjų buvo apgriautas karo metu. Na, o paskui jau buvo užstatinėjama. Išliko tik kai kurios gatvių trasos, buvusių gatvių. Pietinėje šito pastato pusėje, va čia, kur labiau mes stovime, ir buvo tas sinagogos didysis kiemas, apsuptas pastatų. Dėl visiems žinomų priežasčių, dėl holokausto, žydų nebeliko beveik po Antro pasaulinio karo. Sinagoga ir aplinkui esantis namai buvo labai smarkiai apgriauti. Tačiau tos nešančios sienos galima buvo perdengimais uždengti, atstatyti visą tai. Na, o sulyginta su žemėm, aišku, ir pastatytas kiek vėliau tipinis vaikų darželis.
kai patekau, tai aš net tada ir pati nelabai žinau, kas čia dar buvo. Girdėjau, nes metai prieš buvo pradėti tie kasinėjimai, kad čia buvo sinagoga, tai jau žinojau. Bet kai čia įėjau, kažkoks, gal tas žinojimas tau duoda tokį, žinai, kad vau, kaip įdomu, žinai. Ir man dar patiko, kad ir sinagogos langai žiūrėjo į tą pačią pusę ir tai, kad, va ta šviesa, aš tikiuosi, kad ir ten matė lygiai taip pat, tą patį dangų, tai. Kai sugalvojau, kad bus langai virš altoriaus, tai iš tikrųjų net nesapnavau, kad atkastos bus tos grindys iš tikrųjų. Ir buvo Liepos mėnuo ir čia pradėjo ją kasinėti. Ir paskui vieną dieną jau čia po to langu žiūriu kažkoks jaudimas, girdžiu, žinai, nes aš toj studijoj ir girdžiu kažkoks šūrai, žinai, ten visi, kažkas ten jau tas prūt kažką atrado, žinai, aš vis klausinėdavau, ko jūs čia ieškot, žinai, ką jūs čia norit surasti, šventą vietą, ten kažkokia vieta, kur stovėjo, Tora galėjo stovėti, žinai. Ir ta diena ir atrado. Tikrai buvo džiaugsmas ir toksai, ir kas tada įdomu ir galvoju, ką dabar daryti, tai ką man reiks vėl grindis daryti, nors buvau apsisprendęs, kad jau pasibaigė mano tas ciklas, nes iš tikrųjų jis gali begalybė tęstis. Bet jau kai šitas ir tai po langą ir pamačiau ir kažkaip viskas susivedė į tą tašką kažkokį. Ja.
Taip mes, dalis iš mūsų skaitom apie Vilniaus gaoną, tai apie buvusias sinagogas, taip toliau ir ta prasme apie kažkokią istorinę to svarbą, bet būtent klausimas, kodėl tai mums turi būti svarbu dabar. Ir galbūt ta svarba, jinai gali būti labai įvairi, jinai gali būti tiesiog kažkokie tokie materialūs, išlikę dalykai kaip grindinys. Ir net kažkokie tai to seno sluoksnio estetiniai dalykai, jie kažkaip kitaip kalba negu tiesiog rašytinė istorija, kurią mes galime perskaityti istorikų tekstuose. Svarbu ir tai, kad tai daro menininkas, svarbu, kad tai daro Eglė taip, kaip ji daro, nes ji daro tai visiškai kitaip, negu padarytų kažkas kitas. Tai yra būdas kažkaip galvoti apie tą istoriją kaip dabarties ir ateities dalį.
Kai buvo ta paroda ir po parodos ten būdavo kartais net gatvėje keletas ir dėkoja, kad jie pamatė, žinai, kiti, kad ten, kad kitai pradėjo žiūrėti į Vilnių, daug kas taip jau pradėjo, aš niekad nemačiau, dabar sako, negaliu net praeiti, žinai, viską tik grindis matau. Tai toks, faina, nes iš tikrųjų man tai irgi gražu.
And now it is my pleasure to give the stage to my colleague and tonight's discussion moderator, Dr. Ula Tornau, and our esteemed panel. Thank you again for joining us and enjoy the discussion.
Good evening, everyone who joined us for the screening and event tonight. And thank you, Elena Kidoshut, as well for introducing us. Elena was actually one of the engines in producing the film and also this discussion. Herself also a researcher in Jewish history. So thank you for introduction. And I would like to say a few words on the very beginning about how this discussion came to our minds, and also why did we think to make this film. All started from seeing the series of Eglė Ridikaitė, We Are Guests, that you saw in the film. And just seeing these very subtle series depicting not only the fragments of Bima, but also some Soviet fragments of a typical kindergarten, which was built upon the site of the destroyed Great Synagogue of Vilna. We just were realizing that actually it's so much absence. It's so much absence in our awareness about what is the controversial history that we are walking on every day. And somehow that is very often not part of our knowledge, even if we know it somehow. So we invited Eglė to show her work in the exhibition at the Contemporary Art Center in Vilnius in 2020, in the exhibition which was called Head with Many Thoughts. And then also we realized that this building of Contemporary Art Center in Vilnius, which is our landmark of modernist architecture, built in 1967, is also erected on the site of Jewish ghetto, on the site of destroyed Jewish bank, and also residential houses. So that this history somehow is in our everyday, but also we are not aware of that. And the question then rose how contemporary art and how contemporary art can also contribute to growing, to the increase of this awareness, and what kind of absence can we be talking about? Because on the one hand, it's an absence in the general awareness, even in our historiography sometimes, but also very often it's a certain urban absence, architecturally unarticulated spaces, as in the case of the environs of the current environs of the Great Synagogue of Vilna, which is not there anymore. So therefore, we thought of asking and making this inquiry, inviting very extraordinary speakers that we have today with us, to have a conversation about how these thinkers and practitioners and artists are inhabiting those absences in their work. I will very briefly mention the perspectives of all the speakers that are here with us, and because I want to outline a little bit the script of our discussion. And after each presentation, which will take place from 5 to 10 minutes of our speakers, I will also ask the general audience to give your questions in the Facebook event page from which you are watching the broadcast. So first of all, I will want to ask an architect and professor, Amnon Bar-Or from Israel, to talk, who has worked a lot in conservation and also reconstruction of different archaeological sites, as well as teaching and writing. His perspective of these post-traumatic sites and absences and how he sees it architecturally. Then we will Rasanta Navičiūtė, who is my colleague and the head of newly established Vilnius Museum, and who was actually spending all her life growing for many years, living in the courtyard of the Great Synagogue of Vilna, to share her more subjective attitude towards this place, and how she sees this absence and a lack of architectural but also historical articulation from the perspective of a neighbor. Then we will move to Italy, to Ostia. We will give a word to Ada Chiara Zevi, who is a curator and professor, and who is organizing a regular contemporary art festival in the destroyed Synagogue of Ostia. And then an artist, Dorit Lecha-Levi from Israel, will introduce his work about Beirut Synagogue, which is in a way fictionalizing the memories which maybe were never there. Lastly, we are coming back to Lithuania, and we will ask a writer and curator and artist, Paulina Pukytė, to shortly introduce her project which she was curating, the Kaunas Biennial in 2017, and part of it was dedicated to memorization of Kaunas ghetto. But also she will give a very brief outline of these very few artists, Lithuanian artists, who were working with similar histories in the contemporary art field in Lithuania. So now I'm really glad to ask Amnon Bar-Or to have his perspective on this subject.
I would like to thank, first of all the organizers for inviting me to talk to you about what I'm going to talk, not only about Vilnius and not only about the past. My short presentation involved with architecture, preservation, and psychoanalysis. The time is so short, so it would be impossible to explain the theory of embarrassment zones, but I'll do my best and I'll try to explain it and to show you how it really relates to Vilnius. I'm dealing with a post-traumatic area that in order to deal with them, you need to take the psychoanalysis tools, not only the urban and the architecture tools. So, as I told you, I'm trying to deal with post-traumatic areas. And in post-trauma, as we know from Freud, it's not only a personal trauma, it can be a collective trauma. And for us, the trauma can be seen in the territory, in the place, not only on the people. Just to give you an example, this neighborhood was called Manshia neighborhood. It had few thousand houses. The population was both Arabs, Muslims, and Jews. And you could see at the back of the picture, you could see the old city of Jaffa. So it was a quarter of Jaffa, just very, very near to Tel Aviv. The separation between Jaffa and Tel Aviv started in the 21 by the British Mandate. And they drew the line, the border between those two cities, which was actually here, it was, as you see, one city. But this black spot already says something about us and them. By this separation, we separate not only the territory and the houses, but also the state of mind and the philosophy of life. And as we wanted a modern Bauhaus city, like you see in the picture on the right-hand side, the Dizengoff Square. On the left side, you could see the historical city of Jaffa, commercial place, an old city. 48, Independence War, and the Nakba, as the Arabs called it, the complete destruction of the inside the old city of Jaffa and in Manshia, not completely destroyed, but mainly destroyed, as you see. Right after the independence, Jewish refugees, it mainly came from Europe, from the camps, they start entering those houses because there was no other dwellings, and they actually lived there and it became their home. But the municipality had completely different ideas. They wanted to turn the whole place into the center, the economic and business center of Tel Aviv, of the whole country. And they had many offers from many architects all over the world to build some megalomaniac project of the city of Tel Aviv. And this involved also the evacuation of the Jewish people this time. So what we see in the same area twice, people had to leave their houses and leave the place, but this time definitely because it was completely destroyed. As you see in the map of Tel Aviv, you could see the gray and the black spots. It was all erased, all completely destroyed. Part of it after the 48 war, and part of it till the 1980s. There was a big problem. What should we do with all these rubbles? There was mountains of rubbles of destroyed houses. As you see, the neighborhood was huge. So very simple solution, they just push it into the sea. By pushing it into the sea, they created new space, but it's space that you cannot build anything on top of it, or the only way to do something is to make a park. And this is the result of the Manshia neighborhood. On one hand side, you see those 6 buildings that were built from this huge project, and they stand there alone, don't find themselves, very, very strange. You see a lot of parking lots, empty spaces, and this place was dried into the sea from the rubbles of the homes that were built here before. But as in psychoanalysis, we know that Freud also talked about repetition compulsion. If you don't treat the trauma, you keep repeating it and repeating it all the time. So we find it the same in this area. In 1980 was built very strange building for a dolphinarium. Well, at that time, maybe it was logical. It didn't work for a long time, and it was neglected for a long time. And only 4 years ago, it was destroyed. My question was, why couldn't you turn it into a public building just right on the beach? You could use it for everybody. No, but the only way we treat this area is by destruction. So we keep on destroying. That's the only thing we know. So by seeing these 3 pictures, you could see Manshia in 1920, Manshia after 48, and Manshia today. And this is what I called embarrassment zone, a place that you don't find any orientation, what was before, what is coming after. And of course, it's not by chance that almost every initiative failed in this place. And this is the repetition compulsion, of course. First, the destruction of the neighborhood, and then the destruction of the same building that was built on top of this neighborhood. So this is the name that I gave to these areas, these zones that suffer so much, and you cannot really, as an architect, as a conservator, how could I treat them if I don't, first of all, treat the embarrassment? But to see why it's important to identify these areas, because right from the beginning, you could see the result. Because if I look at this map, which is the Geddes map, St. Patrick Geddes was a Scottish urban planner that made a very good and fantastic plan for Tel Aviv that still exists today. Most of Tel Aviv that we love so much was built under this plan. But look at the absence. Look at the white spots that there's no city there. There is a city there, but we don't consider it. So right in 25, people could say, maybe at the end it will be destroyed and completely erased. It doesn't happen only in Tel Aviv or in Jaffa, it happens also in Jerusalem, it happens in Haifa. So just very few glimpses of Haifa and downtown Haifa next to the Gulf, next to the sea. You see this neighborhood of Wadi Salib. This is the valley, and it was called under this name. And this very simple neighborhood of workers. Most of them work in the port. As you see the map of Haifa, in the port, and in all the train industries by the British. So here you could see the neighborhood in the beginning of the 20s. And this is the neighborhood after the Independence War. Now, this I could call a trauma. And I show you what is the difference between trauma and embarrassment zones. The same what happened in Jaffa happened here, but in the empty houses, those houses that their owners had to leave the house and could not come back, the Muslims I talk about, in the same buildings entered this time refugees and new immigrants from North Africa, mainly from Morocco, and it became their home. But because of the very bad condition and other problems between Ashkenazi and Oriental Jews, start in 59, start the riots of Wadi Salib, very famous riots, quite a social revolution against the government and against the way of treating those people. And it was so serious all over the country. And the mayor of Haifa, the only solution it could give to this place was this, destroying this historic neighborhood. Unfortunately enough, people stopped him, and he had another idea, which was not strange at that time, to turn those half ruins into an artist colony. That was a kind of a solution. What should we do with those houses? Let's put artists there. And of course, it never succeeded. And the result is, this is how it looks today. Those empty, vacant houses, sealed completely. Nobody can enter. And it's even ridiculous because on each building it says, a building for conservation. And this is what happens. This is the embarrassment area, where they hide the destruction by those parks and those piazza, and of course new buildings that completely don't have anything to do with the traditional buildings of this neighborhood. There are other civilizations who is dealing with the very difficult memories in a different way. They don't hide it. On the contrary, in Berlin, you could see it almost in every step. Because I think they know that by hiding it, you have the chance to repeat it. But by talking about it, by letting it the main subject all the time, might stop repetition compulsion. So just to conclude, as I told you, it would be impossible to describe the whole theory. I want to give you five criteria for the embarrassment zone. First of all, you have some previous knowledge. You didn't land from the moon. You go to a place, you know something about it, maybe more, maybe less, but something you know. Then there's a mixed architecture, very strange mosque next to the Dolphinarium, next to the towers, next to the hotels. This mixture of architecture, which is very strange, and among them, the most evident thing is the empty spaces, lots of parking lots, lots of parks. And of course, the park and the parking lots are taking most of this place. And when you walk there, even though you don't have any idea there were thousands of houses here, it's something strange here. You don't understand why the beach doesn't go on, but there is this area and why the towers are here. And something very important is the heritage. You are looking at it and you see there is some heritage, tangible heritage, thing you can touch. Like this mosque that was the only building that was left because it was a mosque from the neighborhood. But more important is the intangible culture, the things you cannot touch, but you learn about them from the memories, from people. Because by erasing, you don't erase the memory. This is a very big mistake of many people. Who think that maybe if we erase the neighborhood, if we erase the house, we erase the existence of these people. Not at all. So this is the result, disorientation. And disorientation for me is embarrassment. Just a few things about Vilnius. I went to Vilnius twice. And the second time I came with two students of mine who just learned about this theory of embarrassments area, and I convinced them to come with me to Vilnius and make some inquiry and make an architectural proposition, because it was their final thesis and the final exams for the School of Architecture at the university. So they made a very nice and what we see, what I try to see, of course, I want to tell you your story, but what we see that when the Germans left, most of the Jews, of course, were murdered, but the houses were still there. You could still do things with the houses. The synagogue was still there. Who changed completely were the Soviets, those who came to liberate the place, and they had different ideas about the city, and they, of course, made this new big boulevard to destroy some houses from the Jewish ghetto. And of course, as you already told you, on top of the synagogue, they built this strange architecture kindergarten.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, Amnon. Something went wrong with the sound. Do you think you could check what it can be?
The suggestion could be mute yourself and unmute yourself.
Yeah. Do you hear me better? No. So the only thing, I'm almost finished. I have 2 slides. So can you at least understand what I'm talking?
Yes.
Okay. I'll do it as clear as possible. So I came with my students, of course, to see and to understand why we can call it embarrassment zone. This empty, absent area with different architecture that leaves you completely disorientation. And they, of course, what they try to solve, because they're students of architecture, of course, they did the synagogue, but they left the kindergarten. Big discussion. Should we leave the kindergarten or not? Of course, my idea was very clear. I said it twice, loud, in front of many people. If you destroy the kindergarten, you keep on doing the same thing, and you take off one of the most important evidence of what happened to this place. By erasing it, you don't erase anything. On the contrary. So what they did, on top of the synagogue that they were digging, they kept the kindergarten, but they left it as entrance hall, museum, all kind of uses, and then they covered it all with a new envelope to give it a new, of course, not a restoration of the old synagogue. That's for sure not. And of course, they filled the whole emptiness with residential houses. And this is their project. See, the kindergarten enters to this new construction, and actually all the levels, all the strata are there. You can read it, you can understand it, and you can treat the history through architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amnon. It's indeed, I think it would be amazing to hear more about all of those insights that you have seen, and to hear more about this material. And I think it's very nice that we are coming back to Vilnius and to the courtyard of the Great Vilna Synagogue, because we will ask Rasa to talk about it and maybe even broadcast it in her more very personal and subjective story about this courtyard and the site. Rasa, are you with us?
I think I am. Am I?
You are.
Can
yes.
you hear me? Okay.
And we see you, yes.
Okay. So I'm going to tell a very personal story, as Ulla said. I'm going to tell my family's story and kind of connect it very closely with the place where I'm standing. We moved in. I will try to switch off myself and show you the area that I see now in front of myself. So we moved in here in a nearby courtyard in 1972. I was a baby back then, and my parents were also newcomers to Vilnius because both of them were studying engineering in Kaunas. And then in 1961, they traveled to Vilnius to kind of rebuild the new Soviet capital. So for the first 10 years, they lived in another area, but in 1972, they moved in here, and we've got an apartment in a former Jewish quarter of Vilnius. But at that time, no one was really talking about it. So this courtyard where I'm now walking, and I'm sorry for my shaking hand, you see this space which connects with the old town, with the former Jewish quarter. And you can see this place right there, which kind of starts strangely from nowhere and then finishes when you exit with this empty space, which now I can call embarrassing space. But for me, it looked as a strange place first of all. So basically this word strange was the feeling that you would get. I was walking this space every day because this was my way to school, but there was no idea what was strange about it. I mean, we didn't articulate. As kids, we knew nothing about the place. And the same is actually valid for my parents, because they were newcomers and there was no one to tell. Basically, in Vilnius, there were 3.7% of former inhabitants left after the Second World War. So people in buildings here, in the new building on Vokiečių Street, and also in these restored buildings of the former Jewish town, they were inhabited by people who had no idea how Vilnius looked before the Second World War. And I would say that this is a common project by both Nazis and Soviets to kind of delete this history altogether. So during the Second World War, people were deleted. And after that, another group of people, local Poles, were kind of forced to leave Vilnius. And by 1955, 1960, you actually had a town full of young couples, optimistic young couples, who had no idea of how did it look before. This is the kindergarten that you saw also in the previous presentation. This was a Russian kindergarten. Next door, there was a Lithuanian kindergarten. So we would go to play in its courtyard, but that's it. There was no idea that there was something else. Another interesting thing that it was pretty late that I discovered the history of this place. And I checked when did an article in Wikipedia appear about the Great Synagogue in Vilnius, and it was 2007 in Lithuanian. And basically this is about the time, also connects with Vilnius being European Capital of Culture in 2009, when local history was discovered. And this is only then, when I was really a grown-up person living all my life in this place, I found out about this, the story of the space. So here is another angle of the same spot, and it's still empty, and there are no plans to do something about it. People started planting trees and Christmas trees. There are trash containers, some sort of a sports space, but it really feels awkward and it is embarrassing in a way. So I think I could also finish by that. I hope you got a feeling of the place, and I will be happy to take part in the discussion after the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rasa, very much for your broadcast and for your story that you shared with us. I think it really gives a feel, and I just would mention that what Amnon was talking about, that the Great Synagogue of Vilna, or its remains, let's say, but it was not destroyed very badly during the war. It could have been restored. Was finally bomb destroyed in 1955-57. And afterwards, a Soviet typical kindergarten building was built upon it. Now, since a few years, it's empty as well. It's a huge discussion going on what to do with this building because it's not considered architecturally valuable. So that's what Amnon was meaning, that now the discussion is that maybe to destroy the kindergarten and rebuild the synagogue, or what do we do on the site, and what do we do with the site nearby, which Rasa was showing at the moment. So Amnon was talking about this reproduction of destruction that he was saying, and actually this empty kindergarten, abandoned until the decision would be made, was given for the Vilnius artist studios, and that was a studio of Eglė Ridikaitė, which you saw in the film, and therefore, since the excavations of the Great Synagogue were happening on the same site, she saw this uncovered bima. And then there have been already several projects, one project also in this kindergarten, and I think Paulina will mention it or maybe even show it as well in her presentation. But the further question is how the artists are inhabiting those places and how they are trying to work with them. And first of all, now I will ask Adakiara Zevi to tell about her contemporary art festival in the Synagogue of Ostia, very old synagogue, and just also share her perspective on how it is possible to inhabit those places now.
Thank you, Ula. Thank you very much for inviting me in this very important and interesting symposium. Okay, I am going to talk about this initiative, which is called Art in Memory, and it is a biennial of contemporary art housed in the ruins of the ancient synagogue of Ostia Antica. This biennial started in 2002, and it reached already the 10th edition, and 50 artists have been invited from all over the world. Please, Elena, if you can show the picture, we can see just very quickly all the artists who participated to the 10th edition. Okay, I can do anything here, right, from here, okay. After? Okay. Yes, these are the artists. These are the artists who participated to the. Please, can you do it smaller? Elena, can you do it smaller? Because there is. No, because behind this there is my text. And I need to read it behind the screen. No. What happens?
The Chiara, I believe if I'm sharing, that's how it is. Maybe. I'll stop sharing.
Oh.
But
Is it possible to show it smaller?
I tried, but you still don't see
Not
the.
full screen?
I'll try. 1 second, please.
Thank you. But in the meantime, I can talk.
Do you see your text now?
No.
This is not
No,
full screen.
Yeah, it is. For me, it is.
Can you do escape?
No, I don't know what's happening.
Maybe we can move on to dog, maybe, and meanwhile we'll figure out how to help Ada Chiara to show the.
Or we can show afterwards. I don't know.
I would suggest that maybe Ada Chiara, you can briefly tell us about the project, and then we can quickly scroll the slides. So maybe we can listen briefly to the to your text.
Well, allora, I will say something about the place. Allora, the synagogue of Ostia is part of the archaeological site of Ostia Antica, and it is a ruin. But it is a monument of great architectural, artistic, and symbolic value, because after the one in Delos, it is the oldest synagogue in the diaspora. It was built in the 1st century. It means soon after the destruction of the Second Temple by Titus. According to the decorations and the number of rooms, it was a synagogue for a very wealthy community, which has grown over time, reaching its moment of maximum splendor in the 4th century. Afterwards, it began a period of definitive abandonment and decline. This synagogue was discovered by chance in 1961 during the works for the Fiumicino highway. From the map, we can see that the synagogue, we will see that the synagogue is at the very end, they settled at the very end of the archaeological site, and we will see why later. It was the capital with menorah, lulav, etrog, and shofar that made it immediately recognizable as a synagogue. I think the synagogues we are talking about are doubly sites of trauma. First of all, because they have been built as a consequence of the destruction of the sanctuary. The centrality of the temple has thus been compensated by the multiplicity of the synagogues all over the world. I think that this big loss turned out to be an enrichment for the Jewish people living in the diaspora. All the synagogues of the diaspora, in fact, have some common elements which make them the memory of the temple. For instance, the proximity to the sea, the presence of the Aron HaKodesh, where the books of the Torah were kept, of the Teva on which to read them, of a source of water for ablutions, of the orientation towards Jerusalem. This is on one hand. On the other hand, each synagogue is very different from one another, because architecture and artistic decoration depend on their context, on the exchange between different cultures. In the case of Ostia, the context is the Roman world, particularly open and cosmopolitan. The proofs are, we will see in the map, the proofs is the layout, the shape of the synagogue is a basilica, which is taken from the Roman world. And then also the mosaics are in black and white are very similar to the ones that we can find in the houses and in the stores in the settlement. The second trauma was obviously the destruction by the Nazi. In the presence of this second destruction, which would actually be the third considering the Temple of Solomon, we must ask ourselves what to do with these ruins, how to preserve their memory, how to make them alive and current. I think today's conference is an important step in order to show some possibilities. Some synagogues have been rebuilt and function as places of worship. I think of the big synagogue in Berlin. Others, like the one in Vilnius, have been replaced with other buildings in order to erase their memory. Others have become the hint for artistic interventions. I think of the synagogue Lindenstrasse in Berlin, where artists, where Zvi Ecker, the architect Zvi Ecker, and the artist Micha Ullmann, they did a work of art out of the building because they didn't want to rebuild the synagogue, but they thought of the people who were living the synagogue. And so they built a sequence of rectangular benches as the wooden ones and in the same place as were the wooden ones in the original synagogue. But the synagogue is not covered. So actually we have the memory of the synagogue, but we have these places where people can stay and live today. Another example is, for instance, the synagogue of Hamburg, where the artist Margaret Kahl, it was completely destroyed, and she built on the ground the trace of the original. These are just two examples of a way you can interpret, or the way in which you can keep the memory of something which is completely destroyed. Then there is the case of the synagogue of Stommeln, which is the one which inspired my projects. The synagogue in Stommel is the only synagogue, the German synagogue, which survived the Nazi, because it was sold to a farmer, so it was not anymore a synagogue. Therefore, it was saved. So, to 1991, it was restored and it became a place for cultural events. But then, since then, it became just an exhibition place. Every year, an artist was invited to do a work on purpose for that synagogue, which is a synagogue not very of great artistic value because it's of the 19th century. But anyway, it's important from the symbolic point of view because it's the only one survived. It has some signs, the Star of David, and then there is the matroneo for the women, the place where women used to stay. And so it is a memory of the temple, but in a way now it's used in a completely different place. So my idea was, okay, we have near Rome this incredible place like the synagogue, which is so important as also from the architectural and the artistic point of view. So say, why don't we try to do the same? Fortunately, the superintendency was very open-minded, so they allowed me to do this project, which is still on. Just a sec. Ecco. Allora, what is the sense of this exhibition? How to choose the artist to go there? So just a second. Okay. How to choose the artist there? As Ostia is an outdoor place, first of all, painters and video artists are excluded, as well as the degradable materials. Allora, the way I invite the artists, so I invite the artists first of all because they are good artists. They are not asked for a themed work or a celebratory or a commemorative one, even if the title speaks of memory and the opening of the exhibition is around the Day of Memory. Instead, what is requested to the artist is an original work, the result of the relationship the artist established with this millenary place. A preliminary visit, a sine qua non condition, allows the artist to get to know and live the place, drawing inspiration for a project that is not only that is realized only in a second time. In the two-way exchange between work and place lies the meaning and success of the initiative. If the work acquires a new comment, a new midrash from the synagogue condemned to a state of ruin comes back to life thanks to art, and thus renews its vocation to hospitality, study, dialogue, confrontation between different and dissonant languages. In this way, the Ostia project is sympathetic with the Eglė paintings, inspired by the floors of the old synagogue. Because Egle's paintings are Egle's paintings and can be read as an autonomous work of art. But the fact that they were made in the space of the former synagogue in Vilnius allows them to become a work on the memory of the Jewish community of the city. As in Ostia Synagogue, the works are recognizable of works by Kunellis, Wiener, Buren, Rakowitz, but when they are installed in the synagogue, they become immediately part of that history and culture. And that was, and this is what fascinates so much the artists that are invited, but at the same time, this scares them very much. If I have time, I can show some examples of the artists. Otherwise, I can do it later. If you want, I can show some slides of what I say till now concerning the synagogue, and then we can do with the artists afterwards. It's up to you.
I would say that we can very briefly scroll through the presentation, if you are okay with that, Chiara, just to see some images about which you were talking about. Thank you.
Exactly. Allora, this is okay. These are some of the works. This is Solowit, Kunellis, Mochetti, Fabio Mauri. Some of the work, just to give you an idea of the different kind. You see this mosaic by Daniel Buren. This marble is from Susanna Solano, just to see how the artists are inspired from different kind of things. It's not the memory of the Shoah, it's not the memory of Jewish, but this is the palm tree was by Rakowitz. I know Rakowitz exhibited in the museum in Vilnius. This okay. Okay, this is the map of Ostia, and you see this red square is where the synagogue is placed, and I told you that it's at very end of the settlement, because once here, instead of the highway for Fiumicino, there was the sea. Therefore, the synagogues are all of the diaspora are always near the sea. Therefore, it is so decentralized. This is the synagogue. You see, it was not rebuilt, just the columns. This was the monumental. You see, this is a circular. This is the Arona Kodesh, because a strange, very strange shape. It comes from Syria, for the echo. This is the menorah. This is what make them recognize when it was excavated in 1961. When they found this, they said, "Okay, this is a synagogue. This is a copy." Echo. This is the synagogue. The oldest part of the synagogue of the first century is the letter D, which is the holy part. This is number 3 is the Arona Kodesh, and then you see the basilica shape. The entrance was at A, letter A. Then it came, this is a very important, you see on the G, this was a sort of kitchen, because the synagogue was not only a place for prayer, but it was also a place for hospitality. So here you see an oven for the matzot, for the bread for Pesach. And then this is another room. Echo, this is the mark. Okay, this is very similar to the other ones. This is Lindenstrasse. This is the work I told about Zvi Ecker. These are the benches, exactly where the wooden benches were in the original synagogue, but the synagogue, as you see, was not reconstructed. This is Hamburg. This is Stommeln. You see this, this is the inside of Stommeln. And this is Ostia. This is Ostia. This is Cunelli's work. You see this great cage. This cage was full of birds, because he wanted the synagogue be live. It again were lived with people, not with people, but with birds. This is Sollewit. Sollewit, he rebuilt the Arona Kodesh, but he did it outside. So this is like a modular sculpture, like a minimalist sculpture. Sollewit was a minimalist artist. So you see what I was saying, that this sculpture is absolutely autonomous. It can be read as a work of Sollewit, but it's related to the Arona Kodesh. So if you put it here, immediately it becomes part of the place. That I wanted to say, as the work of art, they take a new comment, something more in addition from being in this history. And at the same time, the place is echo. This is a work inspired by the oven. You see, it's inside the oven, of the oven for matzot. This is Susanna Solano. This is the well, the Roman well for the ablutions. So she took these strigillature and she draw the strigillature the same here, but in a very free way. So there is the relationship, but also, this is the mosaic which Daniel Buren did, starting from an old, you see here a little piece of old mosaic, and he built this new one, which is inspired from the drawing of a mosaic, which is in the next area. This is an Israeli artist, Weissman. Okay, this is Lawrence Winner. Lawrence Winner, he put these coins inside the synagogue as the stones that the Jews put when they go and visit the cemetery. So he said, I put these coins, when people come and visit our exhibition, they take it. And instead of bringing it, they take this in memory of the exhibition. This is Rakovic's work. This is a long story, but very fascinating, because you see, this is a Genitsa. Allora, Genitsa is a place in the synagogue where you keep all the scrolls of the Torah, the books which are ruined and cannot be used anymore. So you put them here, waiting for being buried. So what happened? Rakovitz, he comes from Iraq, as you know. He's Iranian Jew, and so it happened that his mother was Iraqi and transmitted to him the tradition, Iraqi tradition. So he collected many objects from the Iraqi tradition. And when his mother was ill, became ill, he thought that all a culture was dying. And so he decided to bury all this collection of Iraqi stuff inside the synagogue. This is also a very moving work. And this is from Zbigniew Libera. He's a Polish artist, and he wanted the rail station. Okay. Allora, this
Sorry.
gate, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really fantastic material and amazing artists which have worked on the same site. So it has already a story of very different perspectives on that very interesting antique spot. Now I would like to ask the artist, so Dort Lecha Levi from Israel himself, to talk about his work based on quite a lengthy research and about Beirut Synagogue. So please, Dor.
Thank you. So first of all, thanks the organizers for inviting me to present my work in this inspiring and important event. I will present my piece, Shomer, through a video that I will show. But before, I want to introduce myself and my practice in a few words. So, I'm an artist. I'm based in Tel Aviv area in Israel, and I work mostly with video and sound installations, performances, and public pieces. I usually start a project by collecting memories. So I look for documents, for archival photos, for testimonies, and for stories. In my studio, these materials are detached from their original context, and I reconnect them in a way that I hope to present them in a new light. These reconstructed materials are later fused together in an exhibition space, creating a large-scale audiovisual installations and immersive environments. So to conclude, I can say that I deal with existing memories and that I also intend to create experiential platforms for new memories to be created. Okay, so that connects me to the project I will present today. The project is entitled Shomer, and it was presented as a solo exhibition in 2019 at Hamidrasha Gallery in Tel Aviv, and it was curated by Avi Lubin. So the project is about Magen Abraham Synagogue in Beirut. This is a beautiful building, and it has a very, very interesting and complex story and history. The work, the video that I will present, kind of tells the story of the synagogue, but in short, I can say that it was built in the 1920s, and that most of the Lebanese Jewish community left Lebanon during the 60s, 70s, and during the 70s, the Jewish quarter, Wadi Abu Jmil, was actually a war zone during the Lebanese civil war, but the building was still partly kept and used. It was guarded by militias, also by the PLO militia, which I find a quite interesting story. The next point of history that I want to share is at 1982, during the Lebanese and the Israeli war, the synagogue was damaged by an airstrike of the Israeli defense forces. And it actually, after it stood in ruins for more than 20 years, until around 10 years ago, that it was fully renovated and restored. So it's now standing in Beirut in actually a perfect shape and condition. So what also what's important for me to highlight regarding this project is that since I hold an Israeli passport, I cannot travel to Beirut and explore the synagogue myself. So I was never there. I actually heard about this synagogue from friends who visited, and I got the very first pictures from them, and something there drew me in. So I started again to collect memories. I collected the thousands of photos that were taken in Beirut in the synagogue over the years. I want to mention in special very beautiful photos by photographer Micha Bar'am that I found in Bet HaTfutzot Anu Museum archive, and he shot them in 1982, just after the bombing. So from all these photos, and with my partner David Chaki, we created a video work that is based on 3D renders of the synagogue building. So we built it in an architectural program, but actually we did it without measuring, without any floor plan. So just based out of photos, taking from a specific point of view. So I treat them as memories. Another thing that I did with the synagogue is I interviewed people who visited the synagogue over the years. So I was speaking to Lebanese Jews, mainly, that were living in Israel or abroad, and they described me the personal memories and experiences from the building. In the project, I chose to focus on one story, the story of a person named Isaac Balayla. He's a Lebanese-born Israeli. He remembers the synagogue from his childhood as a Lebanese kid in the 60s. He later immigrated to Israel, and he actually got back to Beirut as an Israeli soldier in 1982. So he participated in the war, and he came back to the city of his birth, and he played a different role in history. So I found that very interesting, and you will hear its story through my work. So to deliver the experience of my installation, I will present an exhibition walkthrough video of my exhibition. So you will see people experiencing it. Two things that I would like to mention before that. First, you will see the gallery that is 2 stories high, and also the synagogue is 2 stories high, and it's around the same size. You could see the projection works at night from the street, and you could see the facade of the building in Beirut as reflects through my work on the street of Tel Aviv. That was very important to me. We kept the exhibition, actually, the projectors were on at night. So there was a kind of mirage of that building. You also see in the beginning of the video that the audience is taking wireless headphones. So that happens also in the space. I produced sound work that was working as kind of an audio guide. So you will see the sound syncs, the sounds of the audio guide syncs with the videos that are shown in the space. And that happened also in real time. So I finished with that, and I leave you with the video.
I was born in Beirut in 1960 and left when I was a little boy. My memories from the city are very vivid. I remember the Jewish quarter and the Magen Avraham synagogue very clearly. There's a large square at the entrance where all the Jews used to meet on Saturdays. Religious Jews would pray, and then the rest would just gather there and talk. I remember the synagogue as a huge building with very high ceiling. At least as a child, it seemed very high. In the center of the synagogue, there was a raised platform from which the prayer was conducted. The Torah scrolls were kept at the front end of the room in a cloth-covered ark. There were dozens of Torah scrolls in the ark, maybe even hundreds. It wasn't just a small closet, it was huge, one that you could step into, and inside of it you could actually run from one side to the other. On the side of the building, there were windows the shape of a rectangle, and each window had an arch on top of it. Windows were covered with brightly colored stained glass. In the military, I served in the intelligence corps. I asked to be sent to the northern front to Lebanon. When Israel entered West Beirut, I managed to join the first force that arrived into the Jewish quarter. When I got to the gates of the synagogue, it looked desolated. The square suddenly seemed small to me. I approached the front door and saw that the building was closed, so I asked to go in. I was told, "We will not open, it's not safe here." It turned out that during the war, a missile hit the roof, making a hole in it. I peeked inside through the window, so I was able to see the inside of the synagogue. It was completely abandoned, without people. The floor was full of broken shingles and tiles. Here, you see, that's the ruins. You can see the ruins in the picture. I remember these benches exactly. As a kid, they looked very high to me, but now I see that they are actually low. You need to understand, I was very enthusiastic throughout the whole war. For me, this war was a kind of a dream. I have very picturesque memories from there. It's unimaginable, almost impossible to believe that it was a war. I didn't see the city as it really was, damaged by missiles and bullets. I saw my childhood in front of me. For me, it was a nostalgic, fun experience. I felt like I was home. Truth is, I never thought of Lebanon as an enemy country. I love that land with all my heart. To this day, I feel longing for my homeland. For me, Beirut is my homeland, not Israel. My own identity is unclear even today. It'll probably stay that way forever. That's just who I am. The memories that were planted in us are only good ones.
Okay, so thank you. And maybe if I just can say a word to conclude. So the title of the project is Shomer. In Hebrew, it translates to a keeper or a guard. And it's also the action to guard. But the same root, shamar, is using for the word shimur, which means preservation, and also architectural preservation. So as you would assume, an artist that makes a project for a few years, so he probably asked himself several times, what am I doing? Or why am I doing that? So in my case, and with the case of this synagogue in specific, this was a strange question because the actual building in Beirut, it exists, it stands, it was perfectly renovated, and you can admire it if you go there. But it's closed to the public, and many of the people that remember the synagogue cannot visit it or cannot even visit the quarter. So when I was asking myself, one of the answers that I had is that I'm not preservating the building as it was, the facade or the floors or the tiles or the arches. My wish was to preserve the image of the building as it was kept on the minds of the people who cannot visit it anymore. So this is maybe my contribution to this discussion, and thanks again for having me here.
Thank you, Dar. It's really an extraordinary layering of memories or fictive memories that is present in your work. This idea of sort of building this. Rebuilding in a way this synagogue in your audio visual piece without seeing it and without having floor plans, and then in a way also having creating having this main figure talking about it, which also has his imagination about what it actually was, and also lastly then having this total art piece where you have where you feel that maybe you are in that space. And I think it was also very interesting when you mentioned, or Chiara mentioned, this thing that synagogue is not only a spiritual place, it's also a public place. So it's also translating, but also maybe translating this memory that we are imagining, or a fictional memory somehow. So thank you very much, and I think it also exists in the works that Paulina will show us from Kaunas Biennial and also her own work. So I would like to invite Paulina to briefly present also her pieces. Thank you very much.
So I would like to bring you back to Lithuania now, and to answer perhaps a natural question one might have about whether there has been more art relating to Jewish heritage in Lithuania. And also, is it possible for us to touch upon the Jewish subject without there first being a clear acknowledgement of the loss, of the forced absence of the Jewish life and culture? And how to do it without it becoming a mere token, something that is done perhaps to tick a box or to score some points rather than from a real inner necessity. Perhaps one of the ways to make this acknowledgement would be through the narrative of memory and commemoration. I would like to show you 2 examples from Vilnius. Only one of the works is by a Lithuanian artist. So this is probably was the first work of that on that subject, by Eglė Ridikaitė, an installation made in 1995 in a small street, Gaon Street, that leads up to the site of the Great Synagogue in Vilnius. For me, the significance of this piece, this is a net made of hair, human hair. And for me, the significance of this piece lies in its ability to invoke the memory of the place and the trauma, purely because of the sensitivity of the artist to the location she worked in. And it's almost by coincidence and very naturally that this artwork became a temporary monument. There hasn't been much of this type of work in Vilnius before or since. And but there was an installation in 2009 on the site of the Great Synagogue in the same building that you saw in today's film, created by one of the well-known names in commemoration of the most traumatic histories, the German artist Horst Hoheisen. So it was in Vilnius, but it wasn't a Lithuanian artist. And he installed the photographs of the Great Synagogue in the windows of the school. It was of the interior of the synagogue, in the windows of the building, which was then still a school. But this beautiful work was only allowed to stay there during summer holidays, and it had to be removed before the school started, because according to the headmaster of the school, it might upset the children. So a brilliant opportunity to have this extended history lesson through art was unfortunately missed. That was 12 years ago, and I do hope it would not happen today. Sorry, something with my voice. Excuse me. So in 2017, I was invited to curate the 11th KONAS Biennial. And I chose the subject of monuments, present and absent monuments, and the title of the exhibition was There and Not There, Impossibility of a Monument. Impossibility was an important word here. And my main goal with this project was to question traditional commemorative forms and strategies and their ability to speak to us today, and to encourage and legitimize radically new approach to monuments based on the writings of James Young and the works of Horst Heisel, Joachim Gerz, Esther Schalep-Gerz, and others of counter-monument, that instead of glossing over history by creating another presence, emphasizes the absence instead. My other goal was to encourage the overlapping of the world of contemporary art and the world of commemoration, that are very much separate worlds in Lithuania. They almost never meet. To emphasize the abilities of contemporary artists to work with history, memory, and public space, and to promote the idea that contemporary artists should be trusted much more than they are now with decisions on commemoration. And the third reason for me to do this show was the history of my own family, of my grandfather who perished in the Holocaust in KONAS. So for an open call for this exhibition, I invited artists to suggest, among other things, to find ways to celebrate Jewish life, to imagine and to remember how it was or could have been. But I didn't receive any proposals of that nature at all. So I invited 15 international and local artists to explore KONAS. KONAS is the second largest city in Lithuania, together with me through presence and absence of its monuments. Where absence not only meant the removed monuments, we have quite a few of them throughout our difficult 20th century, but the very obvious lack of commemoration for the Jews, either the victims of the Holocaust or prominent personalities connected with KONAS. And we created 23 site-specific installations and interventions in public spaces of the city. About half of the installations touched upon the Jewish subject, the destruction as well as the life, and also some manifestations of anti-Semitism today. The piece you see now is another, what I would call accidental monument. But I only have time to talk about two artworks now, but I urge you to see more from the links that I will post here in the chat, and I will ask the organizers maybe to share with the viewers, whether it's on Facebook or wherever it's possible. And yes, so there will be links to the video documentation of the whole show and the PDF of the catalog and the website of the project. One of the artists that I invited to KONAS was a British Jewish artist, Jenny Kagan, whose parents escaped from the KONAS ghetto, but her grandfather was killed. And this is one of her works in the derelict synagogue in KONAS. She created a very beautiful, mesmerizing video installation in its windows of the murmuration of starlings. And you can watch the moving image in one of the links that I will post in the chat. This is just a still image. What made this work even more poignant and embedded in the location and the environment there was that there was no way to get the power into the crumbling building. There was no electricity there. So the only way we could get electricity was to use the electricity from the street lighting. So the video projection in the windows came on and off together with the street lights in the whole city. So it would show up at dusk and disappear at dawn. And we had to throw this cable through a window because there was no other way to get it in. This is the additional light installation by the same artist on the door of the synagogue. when approaching the building from the side, you would have thought that the light was coming from inside, and that the door is open, and that there is life inside, that something is inside. But when you came closer, you saw that there wasn't. It was just a broken door, and another door was closed behind it, and this beautifully carved inner door exposed by decay only. And the other artwork that I want to show you today is my own site-specific intervention to mark the absence of a monument in the location formerly known as Democrats Square, which is in the territory of the former Kaunas ghetto in the Vilijampolės suburb. It is the site of the so-called Big Action on the 28th of October 1941, a selection of people that resulted in extermination of 9,200 Jews in a single day. It is a strange and derelict and empty, muddy space. I decided to intervene there in this poor, disadvantaged neighborhood with something out of the ordinary, something that would be completely out of place. And it would also be a ritual, a monument that is temporary yet recurring, present and absent at the same time. I wanted to reveal the absence there, not only of a monument and of knowledge of what happened there, but also of people who lived there and of their language that nobody understands there anymore. So for 2.5 months, every day at noon, I had a young classical singer come and sing 2 songs in Yiddish to the emptiness of Democrats Square. The singing was unannounced and unexplained. It just happened every day, always at the same time. At first, the local residents met this strange phenomenon with hostility. There were drunks hanging outside the local supermarket, and they, as soon as the singer started singing, they would start shouting. They mocked the singing and try to overshout it. And there were angry people berating the singer for making disturbance, for making noise, and so on. But after hearing this beautiful and incomprehensible singing for many days, the passers-by started considering it and inquiring about it. And upon learning that it was to commemorate the Jews who lived and perished here, the old people often became tearful and started sharing their memories about what happened there. Memories that perhaps they had been buried deep inside and probably never spoken about. And eventually the drunks stopped mocking the singing and even started making the sign of the cross when they were passing by the singer. And it was by accident captured on the video. If you watch the full video, you will see that moment captured on video. And also someone lit Catholic candles in the place where the singer usually stood. You can see in this photograph. And one day a man with a dog came up to the singer and said, "I'm a drunk, but I know what happened here. And my dog now perks up his ears every day just before noon."
Das ist gewiss die größte Sinn. Oi, wie glücklich und reich ist der Mensch, was hat. Also schöne Matone geschenkt von Gott, wie ein altische jüdische
I believe that my artistic decision not to put any information boards or other announcements or explanations of this artwork, except for a short info in the exhibition guide, made the local people more curious and more wanting to know about what's this all about. And I believe that it allowed for a more intuitive, more personal and emotional connection to the artwork and its message, and especially in the neighborhood where people normally steer away from contemporary art and things like that. And also, I believe that when after 77 days, the singing finally stopped and there was silence again, that there were at least some people there who felt that something was missing. And I would like to end with a Kafka's paradox about silence, which is also absence. The sirens have a still more fatal weapon than their song, namely their silence. And though admittedly such a thing has never happened, still it is conceivable that someone might possibly have escaped from their singing, but from their silence, certainly never. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulina, for the beautiful presentation and also the beautiful conclusion of it. And now we will go to the discussion. Probably we can do it only shortly because the time is running. And I also have this really true feeling that that it's a very initial conversation, and it would be great if each of us could discuss more about the cases we presented here, or rather glimpses to those cases, in requiring much deeper discussion. So hopefully it can take place live in the nearest future. But now I would like you to respond to each other's presentations, but also we already have several questions from our public, and I will maybe begin with the public. There is one very short question to Dor. I guess it's, and I will begin from it. So Joyce Glasser asks, who funded the rebuilding if there are so few Jews left in Lebanon, and Israelis cannot enter it? Dor, could you please?
Yes, but just a warning, short questions can lead to long answers. Anyway, first informative fact, as far as I know, or as far as I heard, the renovation was funded by Jewish Lebanese families that doesn't live in Lebanon and not in Israel. So there is the Jewish Lebanese diaspora, and those families that live abroad, they funded the project, but the project also got, as far as I know, again, support by the Lebanese municipality and system, and a company named Solitaire that is related to the government in Lebanon. So from this answer, it leads me to the other part of the question. Israelis cannot enter. So actually for me, it's also, I started the project with this point of view of Israelis and Lebanese, and that stands aside the border and regarded as enemies. So Jews are usually automatically connected to Israel, but this is actually, it's not the case, and it's not the case in Lebanon. So you could see how Jews can fund a project in Lebanon. They can also go there. I mean, those families, Jewish families that hold passports of Canada or Brazil or the US, where there are big communities, so they can go and attend the synagogue. So although it's not open to the public, I think if I try to imagine why this project was funded, so I see two reasons. One is that those families want to somehow preserve or bring to life the memories of their childhood and the memories of their home birth. But I think also, and for me as an Israeli, it's also interesting to think from the Lebanese perspective. Actually, it's a very strange story with the synagogue, because the IDF had bombed it, and then the Lebanese government authorized its renovation. So I leave maybe with that, or maybe I show quickly, because I think it's interesting for you, just because I was searching online. So in case you want to maybe see, so just a quick photo from the renovation works. And then this is how it looks today. Okay, so basically you can see even the furniture, they kept everything, but it's not being used as a synagogue as far as I know.
So it is not used as a synagogue currently?
For me, myself, I'm not aware of a rabbi in Beirut. I'm not aware of Torah scrolls in the synagogue, although I heard there's an intention of bringing back the Torah scrolls. And I don't know about a community that celebrates the religion or the holidays in public. But since I had no one to ask there, and I didn't get answers, so I'm basing my assumptions on rumors and stories I've heard.
So in a way, you recreated the certain feeling of the community in your work, of that community in your work.
I guess, at least I echoed it. And I guess it's not echoed there. I know from Lebanese people I met abroad, for example, that they have not been told about the Jewish history in Lebanon. And they see that from a certain perspective. And I think they specifically told me about the moment they realized that there is a synagogue and try to reach it. So I think I echo it here, but something is there also. It's a very strange feeling.
Thank you. We also have a few other questions. I will, so Svaya Worthington is just emphasizing that the Great Synagogue was damaged in World War II and demolished in 55, 57, and was replaced by a kindergarten and a primary school, and that was during the Soviet occupation. So yes, that's really true, and also partly that's why, as we are trying often to raise not only various controversial histories, so also Soviet history and Soviet architectural heritage is very problematic, and therefore there are discussions about destroying it sometimes, and also in the case of this kindergarten as well. And then there's a question to you. I don't know who would like to pick it up. I will read it. It's the question from Henrietta Foster. I wonder what people think of creating a ghost structure of the Great Synagogue in the Schulhof in Vilnius, like the frame structure created by Venturi and Rauch of Benjamin Franklin's house in Philadelphia. His original house burned down in 1812, but the structure was recreated in 1974 in time for the bicentennial celebrations. You can see the architectural foundations and floors like in Eglė's fabulous paintings. In the same place is a museum and a sense of revolutionary America, very respectful and not forgetting the loss. I love the space in Jewish Vilnius, and it is about loss. What do people think about this as a memorial? So I wondered maybe Amnon would like to say something about that, or about the suggestion.
Well, very interesting suggestion. Unfortunately, I don't know the example. I'm not aware of the example, so I cannot really relate professionally to that. But anyway, the idea is anything you do in order to commemorate and to remember would be a proper attitude. the question is to whom and how. It's less important for me, but to whom? Who is the community who is going to, is it going to be a touristic place? Only people who want to come and see the place? Or maybe it can be a place of creation, as you doing now with the art. So it has to be, first of all, to be decided what should be done there, and only then I would recommend to try to think about the shape.
I was wondering, would maybe Paulina or Rasa, if she's with us, like to also comment what were the options and plans for rebuilding or commemorating the Great Synagogue, because there were already some. Would you like to say a few words about that? Just in relation to this question of the ghost structure.
I don't know if, okay, Rasa.
Rasa,
sorry, I'm showing the wrong side of the video. Yes. Sorry.
That's nice.
There were several competitions and several proposals, and it's still very difficult to decide. So the first and kind of the most simple proposal was to rebuild the synagogue, but then there was also a realistic question: so who is going to go there? It will probably look similar to the synagogue in Beirut, where there's no community to use it because it was an immense, huge building. So the question, financial question, how, and then there were proposals to demolish the kindergarten and to keep the ruins exposed. There were proposals to create a labyrinth there, a maze, and kind of to commemorate the synagogue and the Jewish community that way, and many other proposals. But somehow it looks like there is this tension also here about further destruction. So the synagogue was destroyed, and now the kindergarten, should it be destroyed really as well or not, or maybe to keep it? And there is no certain answer. Paulina could perhaps add to what I am saying, but I see it as an open issue. On the other hand, the kindergarten itself is not in the best shape. So the school was moved out of the building because of the conditions, because it needs repair, it needs renovation, and then, to again invest without knowing what you want to create out of it is also pending. So this is how usually in Vilnius the artists are invited to inhabit the space and somehow make use of it and also make it alive. So that's the status quo now. Paulina, I would be happy if you continue. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, I also contributed very in a small way to this debate. I wrote this text some years ago, where I already mentioned today the impossibility, and it was about the impossibility. And the impossibility, comparing this impossibility to the idea of Horst Hoheisel that you probably know about, the destruction of Brandenburg Gate as a memorial to the murdered Jews. So the point of that suggestion is that it is impossible. And it is in its impossibility that it is so strong. So, today, and I wrote then a few years ago that today the Great Synagogue's greatness lies perhaps in the fact that rebuilding is so overwhelmingly impossible. Because of course, and then therefore its destruction is even more impossible than rebuilding. So, yeah, that's the kind of metaphoric way of looking at it.
Thank you very much. I think I will want to resume the event soon because we are approaching 2 hours, and as I mentioned already, I guess it is actually a matter of much longer discussion, and I hope we can do it sometime. But I still would like to ask this question, which departed from the film and from seeing Eglė's painting series. Maybe again to Amnon and to Rasa, because the others, I think they already gave some perspectives on that. So what do you think could be the function of contemporary art in contributing to those discussions, which are very difficult? They are very controversial and very difficult and quite impossible, as Paulina said just now as well. So, Amnon, would you like to say a few words about the contribution of contemporary art and its potential? And I know that you have seen Dor's exhibition and you have been in that space that he created. So, would you like to say a few words about that, please?
Well, it's very general to say contemporary art. You know, it could be everything, but of course, installing art and doing it together with art, I think that's a great idea. I think that could be a kind of a development, because we don't have the Jewish community, almost no Jewish community there anymore. And there is already a synagogue functioning. So this might be a continuation of life through art. Of course, contemporary art, because we are in a contemporary time, and it has to be all the time, a revision all the time about what happened. And even though, and it was being shown very nicely before, I mean, not all the works in Ostia Antica are actually connected to what happened there, but altogether, it's a continuation of doing, and while you do, you can remember. It doesn't let you forget.
Thank you, Amnon. And Paulina would like to say something.
I would just like to add and to continue from this idea, you know, what to do on the site of the Vilna Synagogue. When Horst's piece was installed there and then taken away, you know, the images in the windows of the synagogue, the other reason of taking it down very quickly after it was installed was that they apparently they said, oh, it's not really visible, and it needs to be visible. The light needs to be on in one of the windows, but we don't have money, you know, to pay for the electricity to keep the light through the night. So, you know, the idea probably could be, and I suggested a few years ago in my article, that if every current resident in the former Vilnius ghetto in that territory made a monthly contribution, a tiny contribution to the electricity, you know, so they would all know that they are contributing to that, to those 2-3 windows that can be lit during the night, and then the community would be contributing to the mirage, this mirage that can be seen through the windows of the school. So there's no destruction, but the mirage is there.
Thank you, Paulina. And maybe the last question, maybe short, I don't know, but I think, you know, one of the reasons why the idea for this, to produce this film came about and why we are having this discussion was also because it's very few artists who are taking up these difficult themes. And I think although it is very obvious that in current times, also contemporary art often is becoming more political, I would still say that let's say, well, in Lithuania, especially, I don't know how it is in other countries. It's very, very few artists who are tackling this theme. So Paulina has worked with it a lot, but also maybe Rasa, you would like to say your viewpoint as a curator, as an exhibition curator.
Well,
we're going back to your earlier question. I would say that contemporary art can definitely keep this memory alive, and not necessarily on the site. It can keep it in the galleries or some other artworks or video works. But the truth is that there are really very few people who face this, who actually feel the need to deal with this issue, which I think also comes from the story that I was telling, that there is no live memory left in Vilnius about the community and about the heritage. So it takes time. I think the time will come when people will turn back to this issue and kind of emphatically kind of feel that this is part of our identity as well. It doesn't matter that we do not know the people who live here, but we live in the same space, and there is something in common, and we can still look at that history as our own. So this ownership is also missing, I guess. But it's coming back. So in 10 years, I think we are much more advanced than we were in 2009. I'm kind of optimistic. It's a pity, of course, that it takes so long. But I mean, this kindergarten is actually one of the problems that cannot be easily solved, and probably this is why it's standing there for so long. But on the other hand, the Jewish community and also Vilnius municipality doesn't feel well, because then it's kind of a statement that we cannot deal with this past and the building is falling apart, but then yet some artists from Germany are coming and showing how it should be. So, you know, there are also those political issues involved, and it's a big knot that is connected with that side. Again, in my opinion, I think it would be best to find a way to use it, not just to commemorate, but also use it. And think about a function that would not be affected or even be richer with that past history, and not necessarily for the Jewish community, for the local community, that the space could be alive. Because if we use it just for commemoration, there's a threat that it would be alive only during some celebrations or mourning days or as a tourist attraction, which wouldn't serve the purpose, to my mind.
Thank you very much, Rasa. I don't know, does anyone would like to have some burning questions or responses right now? Because if not, I would like to resume this discussion. I think also that contemporary art, and it was already mentioned that it can contribute not only keeping the memory alive, but also in the political discussion, because it is a very complicated discussion. And of course, contemporary art pieces often they are not facing or they are not very explicit, but I think sometimes in a very subtle way they can be very powerful. And I think, for instance, this was the case also of Eglė series that we have seen, and it really has gained a lot of public attention. I would like to thank all the speakers very much for this discussion, and I truly hope that we can continue. I suggest continuing keeping the dialogue, because I guess it was so many common fields and common questions that we have in common in this discussion and short conversation. But then also I would like to thank a few people who were very essential in producing the film and also this discussion. It's Eglė Ridikaitė from the Contemporary Art Center and Rūta Nenartavičiūtė from the Lithuanian Culture Institute, and of course many other people who helped us a lot. It's many countries and many institutions coming together in this event. So I'm wishing everyone a nice evening, and would like to say goodbye. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Good night.
Bye.